The acrid smell of smoke still clung to the air. A cruel, suffocating blanket that choked my lungs and my heart. How could this be happening? My grandfather's ranch, the very soul of my family for generations, was now a skeletal whisper of ash and char. A shudder ripped through me. A primal scream caught in my throat. Just moments ago, the fire had raged, a hungry beast devouring everything I held dear. And there she stood, Karen Sterling, president of the Lakeshore Highlands Homeowners Association, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair untouched by the inferno, a chillingly smug smirk playing on her lips. "Well, Ethan," she purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It seems your rustic charm has finally combusted. What a shame." "Darling." My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms. Shame. This wasn't a shame. It was an execution. A calculated, malicious act. All because my family's old ranch, with its sprawling acres and free-range ethos, didn't fit her pristine vision of manicured lawns and identical stucco. Oh, the audacity. The sheer, unadulterated gall. She watched the last embers die with a detached satisfaction that curdled my blood. "Perhaps now," she continued, oblivious to the fury simmering within me, "you'll finally see the wisdom of our offers to buy you out. Such a perfect spot for our new community pool. Don't you think?" My breath hitched. Offers. They were threats, veiled and then overtly hostile. For months on end, this was her grand finale. A hot, stinging wave of grief and rage washed over me, threatening to drown me whole. How could anyone be so utterly devoid of human decency? The crackle of settling ash was the only sound. A death rattle for my legacy. My mind raced. Fragments of memories flashing Granddad teaching me to mend fences. The smell of fresh hay. The laughter echoing through these very fields. Now, only ghosts remained. This wasn't just arson. It was an annihilation of history. A blatant act of tyranny disguised as community improvement. My throat was tight. But a single, unwavering thought solidified in the chaos. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen Sterling had no idea what she had just unleashed. The following days were a blur of insurance adjusters, fire marshals, and the endless, aching void where my home once stood. Sleep was impossible, haunted by the orange glow and Karen's sneering face. But amidst the despair, a steel resolve hardened within me. I wasn't just going to rebuild. I was going to fight. My first call was to Sarah, an old friend from law school, sharp as a tack and with a reputation for taking on the impossible cases. Her initial gasp when I explained the situation was audible even over the phone. "Ethan, arson, against the homeowner," she exclaimed, her voice tight with disbelief. "That's unprecedented. We need proof. Concrete, undeniable proof." I knew she was right. But where to begin? The fire marshal's report was inconclusive, cause undetermined. They'd said, citing an old electrical system. A convenient lie. I fumed. My electrical system had been meticulously maintained. This was a cover-up. Plain and simple. As I sifted through the charred remains, a glimmer of hope, faint but persistent, ignited. Amidst the debris of my workshop, I found a small, melted blob of plastic. It didn't look like anything that belonged there. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of gasoline lingered. It was just a hunch, a desperate claw at possibility. But I brought it to Sarah. Her eyes, usually so calm, narrowed as she examined it. "This could be something," she mused, turning it over in her gloved hand. "But it's not enough. We need a witness. Someone on the inside. Or a pattern of behavior so undeniable it screams motive." The next day, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. Subject, concerned resident. The message was anonymous. Brief and chilling. "Karen has done this before. Not fire, but destruction. Look into the old oak grove. Before the luxury tennis courts were built." My heart hammered. Had she? This was the twist I desperately needed. I immediately called Sarah. "I think I have a lead," I whispered. a tremor of excitement in my voice. We started digging. Quietly. Methodically. The old oak grove led us down a rabbit hole of hushed complaints and dismissed petitions from a few years prior. Residents had fought tooth and nail to save those ancient trees, only to see them mysteriously razed overnight, clearing the way for Karen's pet project. No official explanation, just a sudden, decisive action by the HOA. A pattern. Then, a few days later, a cryptic message appeared on a local online forum, posted by someone named Whisper in the Wind. Ask about the anonymous donations to the HOA board elections 2 years ago. Some strings are longer than they appear. Sarah, with her incredible legal network, tracked down the identity behind Whisper in the Wind, a retired HOA board member named Beatrice, who had resigned abruptly shortly after the Oak Grove incident. A nervous, frail woman, Beatrice initially refused to talk, terrified of Karen's retribution. But Sarah, with her gentle persistence, finally broke through. Beatrice, tears in her eyes, confessed to witnessing Karen orchestrating the destruction of the Oak Grove, overriding legitimate concerns, and even hinting at paying off certain contractors. And then, the bombshell, she boasted. Ethan, right after it happened, said if anyone else's property stood in the way of progress, she'd make sure it disappeared. I didn't think she meant this. Her voice cracked with genuine remorse. She also talked about the nuisance of your ranch, how it lowered property values, said something about a grand vision for a water feature, right where your land is. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Beatrice's testimony, combined with the melted plastic fragment and the pattern of destruction, suddenly painted a very clear, horrifying picture. The annual Lakeshore Highlands HOA meeting was held in the grand ballroom of the community clubhouse, usually a sedate affair of polite nods and rubber-stamped budgets. Not tonight. The air crackled with a palpable tension, a hushed anticipation that felt like the calm before a storm. Karen, resplendent in a sapphire blue power suit, stood at the podium, a forced smile plastered on her face as she breezed through the treasurer's report. My stomach churned. Sarah sat beside me, her gaze fixed on Karen, a silent promise in her eyes. I had spread the word, quietly, through the community grapevine. Whispers had turned into murmurs, and murmurs into a tangible curiosity. Many residents, tired of Karen's autocratic rule, had shown up tonight, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. When it came time for new business, I raised my hand. Karen's eyes flicked to me, a flash of annoyance momentarily breaking her perfect facade. Yes, Ethan, do you have another complaint about the new mailbox regulations? She sneered, eliciting a few chuckles from her usual sycophants in the front row. I rose slowly, my voice steady, though my heart pounded against my ribs like a drum. No, Karen. Tonight, I'm here to discuss a different kind of regulation, one that involves arson, property destruction, and a pattern of calculated intimidation. The room went silent. A gasp rippled through the audience. Karen's smile vanished, replaced by a rigid, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. Mr. Miller, I find your accusations highly inappropriate and inflammatory. Are you suggesting, she began, her voice rising in feigned indignation. I'm not suggesting anything. Karen, I'm stating facts. I pulled out the enlarged photo of the melted plastic from my pocket, projecting it onto the screen behind her. This, ladies and gentlemen, was found in the ashes of my ranch. It's a fragment of a gasoline container. The fire marshal called the cause undetermined. I call it criminal. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. Preposterous. This is an outrageous slander. She shrieked, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. And then there's this. Sarah clicked a remote, and the screen flashed with a series of old news clippings and community forum posts detailing the mysterious clearing of the old Oak Grove. Coincidentally, just before a new, unnecessary tennis court was built, a project that Karen Sterling herself pushed through. against widespread community protest. The room erupted. People were whispering, pointing. Karen looked like a cornered animal. These are old issues. Irrelevant. Slander. She screamed, her voice hoarse, her face flushed crimson. And finally, I said, my voice cutting through the din, we have the testimony of a former HOA board member, Beatrice Vance, who will attest to your direct involvement in the Oak Grove destruction and your repeated threats against my property. At that, Beatrice, who had been sitting quietly in the back, stood up, trembling slightly but meeting Karen's horrified gaze. It's true, she whispered, her voice wavering but clear. She threatened to make his ranch disappear if it stood in the way of her grand vision. The collective gasp was deafening. Karen stumbled back, her hand flying to her chest. Lies. All lies. She stammered, her voice thin and desperate. But the eyes in the room, once filled with polite indifference, now burned with outrage and a dawning understanding. They saw it. The insidious pattern. The calculated malice behind the polished facade. The gavel, usually a mere formality, lay ignored on the table. The authority in the room had shifted. Irrevocably. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The story of the Lakeshore Highlands, HOA, and particularly Karen Sterling's alleged tyranny, exploded in local news and quickly gained traction online. The public, always eager for a good villain, latched onto the Karen narrative, turning her into a symbol of oppressive HOA power. The fire marshal's office, facing public scrutiny and new evidence, reopened my case. Beatrice's testimony, combined with the forensic analysis of the melted plastic fragment which showed traces of accelerants, provided irrefutable proof. The police investigation began in earnest. Karen, once untouchable, found herself facing criminal charges, including arson and property damage. Her perfectly manicured world began to unravel with breathtaking speed. She tried to deny everything, to smear my name, to discredit Beatrice. But the sheer weight of evidence, and the growing chorus of disgruntled residents who now felt empowered to speak out, crushed her resistance. One by one, her allies on the HOA board, sensing the shifting winds, resigned or turned against her, eager to distance themselves from the unfolding scandal. The community, once passive, became actively engaged. Petitions circulated, not just for Karen's removal, but for a complete overhaul of the HOA's bylaws. I watched from the sidelines, still reeling from the events. But a strange sense of vindication began to settle in my chest. Her downfall wasn't just my victory. It was a win for everyone she had bullied and manipulated. The final blow came during the emergency HOA election, called to elect new leadership, with Karen facing legal battles and the full force of public condemnation. She was utterly disgraced. Her attempt to rally any last vestiges of support was pathetic, met with stony silence and averted gazes. She stood before a room full of her former subjects, not with the usual sneer, but with a haunted, defeated look. Her empire of control had crumbled, built on a foundation of intimidation and deceit. The arrogance that had once defined her had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell of a woman. The air in the room was thick with unspoken judgment. As the votes were tallied, a hush fell. The result was a landslide. Not for me, initially, but for a new slate of honest, community-minded individuals. And then, a truly astonishing thing happened. A motion was put forward by one of the newly elected members, a quiet, unassuming librarian named Eleanor. A move that Ethan Miller be appointed interim HOA president. She announced, her voice clear and strong. He has shown courage, integrity, and a deep commitment to this community, even when faced with unimaginable adversity. Who better to lead us through this rebuild? My jaw dropped. I hadn't expected it. The room erupted in applause. A genuine, heartfelt ovation. My heart swelled. It was a complete reversal of fortune. A poetic justice I never dared to dream of. Karen, slumped in the back row, looked up, her eyes meeting mine. In them, for the first time, I saw not contempt, but a flicker of fear, and perhaps, just perhaps, a hint of regret, the realization of her own self-destruction, laid bare for all to see. The journey to reclaim my life and my land was long and arduous. The ranch was rebuilt, brick by painful brick. But this time, it was a symbol not just of my family's past, but of a community's resilience. As the new interim president, I worked tirelessly with Eleanor and the new board, dismantling Karen's legacy of fear, one oppressive bylaw at a time. We implemented transparent financial practices, established a truly democratic voting system, and, most importantly, listened to the residents. The community gardens flourished. The old oak grove, though gone, was commemorated with a new, beautiful park, and neighbors actually talked, helped, and laughed together again. The air felt lighter, cleansed of the toxic influence that had suffocated it for so long. Was it perfect? No, of course not. Community life always has its bumps and disagreements. But it was ours now, guided by principles of fairness and respect, not by the whims of one tyrannical individual. My ranch, once a solitary bastion against HOA madness, had become the heart of a revitalized community. And as I stood on my rebuilt porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, I knew that justice, though sometimes slow, had a way of finding its mark. What do you think? Was my approach justified? Or did I simply fight fire with a bigger, legal inferno? Where do we draw the line between righting a wrong and becoming what we despise?